Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I always thought owning a home meant security, peace, a place no one could take from you. I was wrong. Some people believe they're entitled to what's yours, no matter the cost. It started with a polite offer, then fake documents, then threats. But when enforcers showed up at my door, I knew this was war. I never expected to find myself in a situation like this. I always thought home ownership was supposed to be a symbol of stability, a sanctuary where a person could live in peace. But as I would soon learn, some people see a home not as a place of security, but as something they are entitled to, regardless of who it belongs to. My name is Algernon Al-J. Bates, and I'm a 35-year-old systems analyst. 5 years ago, after years of grinding away at my career, I finally saved up enough money to buy my dream home. A modest but charming 2-story house in a quiet Sacramento suburb. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every dollar I put into it, every repair I made, every inch of the place, I took pride in it. It wasn't just a house, it was a testament to my hard work. At first, life in the neighborhood was peaceful. The people around me were friendly, but kept to themselves, and I liked it that way. I worked from home most days, enjoyed tending to my small backyard garden, and spent my weekends hiking in the nearby Sierra foothills. Everything was perfect until the Hemptons moved in. Dorothy Dottie Hempton, her husband Rand, and their golden boy son Chad moved into the house across the street about 2 years after I had settled in. At first glance, they seemed like your typical suburban family, pleasant enough, if a little overly friendly. Rand was quiet and mostly kept to himself. Chad was your average college kid who seemed more concerned with flexing at the gym than anything else. And Dottie, well, she was something else entirely. From the beginning, there was something about Dottie that rubbed me the wrong way. She had an air of entitlement, the kind of person who spoke in passive-aggressive compliments that left you questioning whether she was being kind or insulting you. "Your lawn is so natural-looking," she'd say, eyes darting over my carefully maintained grass with an almost imperceptible smirk. Living alone in a big house like this must feel lonely sometimes. It was subtle at first, almost easy to ignore. But things took a turn when Chad graduated from college. That's when Dottie decided that my house should belong to her son. It started casually, in a way that didn't immediately set off alarms. One Saturday morning, as I was weeding my flower bed, Dottie strolled over with that signature tight-lipped smile of hers. "Al-J, dear, your garden is looking just lovely. You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I stood up, brushing the dirt off my hands. "What's up, Dottie?" "Well," she began, her voice sugary sweet. "Chad just graduated, and we're so proud of him. He's going to be working for Rand's firm downtown, and we've been looking for a home for him. And, well," she gestured dramatically toward my house, "this would be perfect for him. It's such a wonderful starter home for a young professional starting his life. We'd love to take it off your hands." For a second, I thought she was joking. I let out a short chuckle. "That's nice of you to say, but I'm not selling." Her smile tightened just a little, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, but think about it. This place is much too big for one person, and Chad is planning to settle down, start a family. Wouldn't it be wonderful to give him that opportunity?" I shook my head. "Dottie, I appreciate the offer, but this is my home. I have no plans to sell." For a moment, her face darkened, just a flicker, a shadow of something lurking beneath the surface. Then, just as quickly, she laughed lightly and waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, of course. I totally understand." But as she turned and walked back toward her house, I felt a distinct sense of unease settle in my chest. There was something about the way she had spoken, the way she had phrased her words. She wasn't asking. She was planting a seed. And I had no idea just how much trouble that seed was about to grow into. At first, I thought that was the end of it. People make ridiculous offers all the time, right? Maybe Dottie was just one of those overly pushy suburban moms who thought the world revolved around her kid. But as the days passed, the signs that she wasn't going to let this go started piling up. It began subtly, in ways that could have been brushed off as coincidences. Chad started showing up unannounced, walking by my house at odd hours, making conversation whenever I stepped outside. "Hey, Al-J," he called out one evening as I was locking my front door. "Just wanted to see how things are holding up. I love this house, man. Can totally see myself living here." I forced a polite chuckle. Yeah, well, I plan on staying put. He grinned like he hadn't heard me. You ever think about upgrading, maybe moving somewhere closer to downtown? This place is great, but, for someone with a family. There it was again, the same phrase Dottie had used. I brushed it off as harmless enthusiasm until a few days later when I caught him peeking into my windows while I was inside. I'd stepped into the living room to grab a drink when I saw movement by the front window. Chad. Hands cupped against the glass, staring inside like he was inspecting a home for sale. I flung the door open. "What the hell are you doing?" Chad jumped back, laughing nervously. "Whoa, chill, dude. I was just admiring the place." Through my windows, he shrugged. "Just checking out the layout. Mom says it's important to visualize your dream home. You know?" I clenched my jaw. "This is not your home, Chad. Stay off my property." He raised his hands defensively. "Geez, okay, man. No need to get all worked up." Then, under his breath, I heard him mutter, "You won't have it for long anyway." That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be as simple as ignoring them. The next week, letters started appearing in my mailbox. The first ones were disguised as friendly offers, written in Dottie's swirling perfect cursive. "Aljay, we really want to help you find a new home that better suits you. We'd be happy to take this one off your hands. You'd love a place closer to downtown, don't you think?" The next letter was an official-looking printed document with numbers that weren't even close to market value. "We're offering you $250,000 in cash for a swift and seamless sale." That was almost $100,000 less than what my house was worth. I tossed the letters in the trash. Then the letters changed. They became more aggressive. "This neighborhood is for families. Selling to us would make things easier for everyone. It would be a shame if this house became a problem. You don't belong here. Just take the offer and move on." Dottie had stopped pretending to be friendly. Now she was making it clear that she saw my presence here as an obstacle. And when I refused to budge, she took things further. I had dealt with pushy people before, overbearing salesmen, nosy neighbors, even exes who didn't understand the meaning of no. But Dottie, she was on a whole different level. After I ignored the letters, she stopped trying to be subtle. It was no longer about persuasion, it was about pressure. It started with the gossip. I caught wind from a neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, an elderly woman who often sat on her porch knitting, that Dottie had been spreading rumors about me. "She's telling people you're planning to sell, but being difficult about it," Mrs. Calloway said, shaking her head. "That you're holding out just to get more money, and that you've been causing issues for the neighborhood." I frowned. "Issues?" "Oh, that your lifestyle doesn't fit the family-friendly atmosphere, that your home is lowering property values because it's not properly maintained." I glanced at my house. Freshly painted, yard trimmed, everything in perfect order. It was clear Dottie wasn't trying to argue with facts. She was just planting seeds of doubt, making it seem like I was the bad neighbor, and soon I noticed the effects. Neighbors who once smiled and waved now looked away when I passed. Small talk at the mailbox turned into awkward silence. It was a slow but deliberate process. Dottie was isolating me, making me feel unwelcome in my own neighborhood. And then came the fake buyers. One evening, as I was about to sit down for dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a well-dressed man in a suit, holding a folder of papers. "Good evening," he said, flashing a rehearsed smile. "I'm from NorCal Realty. I understand this property is for sale." I blinked. "It's not." His smile didn't falter. "Oh, I must be mistaken. I was informed that the owner was looking for buyers, but I'm here with a very attractive cash offer. If you'll just—" "No," I said flatly. "This house isn't for sale." He tried again. "If you'll just look over the documents." I stepped back and shut the door in his face. The next day, another one showed up. Then another. 3 different agents knocked on my door in the span of a week, all claiming they had been told I was selling. Dottie had started listing my house as available in private real estate circles. One morning, I stepped outside and found an envelope taped to my door. It had a fake legal letterhead, but at first glance it looked official. Bold fonts, legal jargon, even a section with county housing regulations. According to the letter, due to community zoning and neighborhood family ordinances, my property was now required to be listed for sale within the next 30 days, or I could face fines and legal action. I read it twice, feeling my stomach twist. But something was off. There was no signature from a city official. The cited laws didn't exist. The supposed law firm listed didn't show up in any database. I immediately sent a picture to my lawyer, Cassandra Cassie Roberts. Within minutes, she called me back. "Aljay, this is completely fraudulent. If they try to use this against you, we can hit them with a harassment and fraud case." I clenched my jaw. "Dottie's behind this, isn't she?" "No doubt about it," Cassie said. "We should file a cease and desist letter immediately." I agreed, but Dottie wasn't done yet. That night, I woke up to strange noises outside. I grabbed a flashlight and checked my security cameras, and my blood ran cold. Chad was on my property. I watched as he walked along my front yard, inspecting the windows and the porch like he was scoping the place out. I didn't hesitate. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my phone, and stormed outside. "Chad, what the hell are you doing?" He turned startled, then forced a cocky smirk. "Whoa, man, chill. Just checking the place out." "You're trespassing," I snapped. "You have no business being here." Chad shrugged. "It's going to be my house eventually, so I figured I'd get familiar." Something in me snapped. I took a step closer, voice low and sharp. "Get off my property. Now, if I ever see you creeping around here again, I'll call the cops." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have warned him. He scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. But I had a sickening feeling in my gut that this wasn't the end. And I was right. The next day, a for sale sign appeared on my front lawn. The moment I saw the for sale sign staked into my front lawn, my blood boiled. I stormed outside, yanked the sign out of the ground, and marched across the street to Dottie's house. I pounded on the door, and a few moments later, she opened it with an innocent smile, as if she had no idea why I was there. "Aljay, what a surprise. Can I help you?" I held up the sign. "What the hell is this?" Her smile didn't fade. "Oh dear, that must be some kind of mistake." I stepped closer. "You put this on my lawn, Dottie. My house is not for sale." She sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her chest. "Well, you're being so stubborn about it, I just thought maybe a little push would help. The neighborhood would be so much better off if—" I cut her off. "Take the hint, Dottie. I'm not selling. Ever. And if I catch you or your family stepping onto my property again, I'll get the police involved." Her smile faltered for just a second, and in that brief moment, I saw the real Dottie, cold, manipulative, and furious that she wasn't getting her way. "I see," she said, her voice dropping into something less friendly. "Well, I do hope you reconsider. After all, you never know what could happen." It was a veiled threat, and I knew she meant it. A week passed. I thought maybe, just maybe, my confrontation had scared her off. But then a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, stamped with what appeared to be an official court seal. I ripped it open and scanned the contents. It was a lawsuit. At least, it was designed to look like one. The document claimed that I was violating neighborhood housing ordinances by remaining in a home that was zoned for families only. It threatened legal action if I didn't comply with a mandatory sale within 30 days. The fine print was laughable, full of fake case references and poorly worded legal jargon. I took photos of everything and immediately called Cassie. She called me back within minutes, laughing. "This is the worst forgery I've ever seen," she said. "Whoever wrote this has the legal knowledge of a YouTube conspiracy theorist." "That'd be Dottie," I muttered. Cassie's tone turned serious. "This is getting dangerous, Aljay. She's escalating. First harassment, then fraudulent real estate listings, and now faking legal action? She's trying to break you down." I exhaled sharply. "What's the next move?" "I'll draft a formal cease and desist, and we're reporting this to the state bar. If she keeps this up, we can take real legal action." I hung up, feeling a little relieved, but I knew Dottie wasn't the type to back down. And unfortunately, I was right, because the next escalation wasn't some phony paperwork. It was something far more dangerous. It happened late at night, just as I was finishing up some work in my home office. A loud knock at my front door. Not a normal knock. A heavy, deliberate pounding, like someone wanted to break it down. A chill ran up my spine. I checked my security camera feed, and my stomach tightened. 2 men. Big guys. Leather jackets. Faces half hidden in the dim glow of my porch light. Something told me they weren't selling cookies. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and cracked the door open just an inch. "Yeah?" One of them, a bald guy with a jagged scar running down his cheek, took a step forward. "You LJ." I gripped the doorknob tighter. "Who's asking?" The second guy, built like a tank, chuckled darkly. "We're just here to pass along a message." I glanced at my security camera. It was recording everything. "Go ahead," I said coolly. The scarred guy smirked. "See, you're making life real difficult for some good people. You keep saying no when you should be saying yes. And that's a problem." I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. The tank-sized guy took a step forward, placing a hand against my door, testing the threshold. "You should sell the house, man. Do the right thing. 'Cause if you don't—" He let the sentence hang, tilting his head. "Well, accidents happen," Scarface chimed in. "Electrical fires, gas leaks, break-ins. And we'd hate to see something happen to a nice place like this." I clicked the record button on my phone's voice memo app and set it on the table behind me. "That a threat?" I asked. Scarface grinned. "Nah, just a friendly warning." Then the tank-sized guy's eyes drifted behind me, to my phone, the glowing red recording icon. "Yo, is that recording?" he snarled. Before I could react, he lunged for the door. I barely had time to shove it shut before a massive weight slammed against it. They were trying to force their way inside. I scrambled backward as the door frame shook from the impact of their kicks. "Open the damn door, you little shit!" Tank roared. I grabbed the bat I kept by the entryway, took a deep breath, and threw the door open just enough to swing. The bat cracked against Scarface's ribs, and he staggered back with a pained grunt. Tank lunged at me, but I dodged, slamming the bat against his knee. Crack. He howled in pain, stumbling. But before I could react, Scarface tackled me to the ground. We struggled, rolling across the porch. His fist caught my jaw, but I twisted my body, forcing him off me. Adrenaline flooded my system. Then I heard the sirens. My security alarm had already sent a distress signal, and now red and blue lights flooded the street. The moment the cops pulled up, the two thugs bolted, but they didn't get far. 4 officers tackled them before they made it to their car. I sat on the porch, breathing hard, as an officer crouched beside me. "You okay, sir?" I wiped blood from my lip and nodded. "Yeah, but I think you're going to want to hear this." I held up my phone, still recording. And just like that, Dottie had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. I sat on my porch, still breathing heavily, my fingers wrapped tightly around my phone. The recording was still running. The 2 men, one nursing his ribs, the other limping, were pinned against the hood of a squad car, handcuffed and cursing under their breath. One of the officers, a stocky guy with sharp eyes, knelt beside me. "You sure you're all right?" I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and nodded. "Yeah, but you might want to listen to this." I pressed play. Scarface's voice crackled through the phone speaker. "You should sell the house, man. Do the right thing. 'Cause if you don't, well, accidents happen." Tank's growl followed. "Electrical fires, gas leaks, break-ins, and we'd hate to see something happen to a nice place like this." The officer's expression darkened as he listened. The threat was undeniable. The cops had caught them in the act of breaking and entering. But now they had evidence of premeditated intimidation. I glanced across the street. Dottie was standing in her front yard, arms crossed, her face pale. She'd heard the sirens, seen the flashing lights, and now she knew her plan had backfired. I met her gaze. For the first time since this started, she looked genuinely afraid. One of the officers approached her, asking if she knew the men. She quickly shook her head, playing the part of the concerned neighbor. She was lying. We all knew it. But without a direct link between her and the goons, she wasn't going down. Not yet. While the cops loaded Scarface and Tank into the back of their cars, I walked around my property, taking in the damage. 2 windows shattered. My mailbox ripped off the post. My security camera on the front porch smashed. The bushes near my porch had been stomped down and partially set on fire. It was clear that if I hadn't fought back, these guys would have done a lot worse. The lead officer, the one who had listened to the recording, came back over. They're going to be charged with assault, attempted home invasion, and destruction of property. But this recording, this changes things. It proves intent. I nodded. Can we trace them back to whoever sent them? The officer's mouth pressed into a thin line. We're working on it. But these guys aren't exactly talkative. If you ask me, whoever hired them is going to try and distance themselves. I glanced at Dottie's house again. She was still standing outside, watching like a hawk. She wouldn't stay quiet forever. She was too arrogant for that. The next morning, I woke up to something even worse than the break-in attempt. As I stepped outside, I saw a large group of neighbors gathered near my driveway, whispering, pointing, staring at something. And then I saw it. Someone had spray-painted huge red letters across my garage door. "Get out!" A few feet away, another message was scrawled across my sidewalk. "This neighborhood is for families." I clenched my fists, heat rising in my chest. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was a declaration of war. A few neighbors approached hesitantly. Some looked sympathetic. Others, not so much. Mrs. Calloway, the older woman who had warned me about Dottie's gossip, stepped forward, her lips pressed together. "This is getting out of hand, Al J." I exhaled sharply. "I know." Another neighbor, a man named Bill, shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't agree with all this, but maybe you should just sell. I mean, if someone's willing to go this far." I cut him off. "That's exactly why I won't. You don't let people like this win." I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting against the idea that someone could bully a person out of their own home. Instead of scrubbing off the spray paint immediately, I took pictures of everything. Then I went inside and made a call. When Cassie answered, I didn't even let her speak first. "We're suing." She paused for a second, then chuckled darkly. "Good. Let's bury them." Within hours, she had drafted a restraining order against Dottie and her family, citing harassment, defamation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We weren't just playing defense anymore. It was time to go on the attack. I had spent weeks being harassed, intimidated, and outright threatened. But that morning, standing in front of my vandalized garage, I made a decision. I wasn't going to take this anymore. By the afternoon, Cassie had already filed the restraining order against Dottie and her family. It wouldn't stop them completely, but it was the first real step toward putting an end to this madness. And, as it turned out, I wasn't the only one who had had enough. Later that evening, as I was reviewing my security footage for anything useful, my phone rang. It was Officer Hernandez, the cop who had listened to the recording of the goons threatening me. "We got one of them to talk," he said. I sat up straight. "Which one?" "The big guy. Guess a night in a holding cell and the realization that he's facing felony charges made him reconsider his loyalty." "And?" Hernandez let out a satisfied breath. "He named Dottie. She hired them, paid in cash, told them to scare you off." I felt a surge of vindication and rage at the same time. "We're getting a warrant," Hernandez continued. "Between the threats, the break-in attempt, and now this, she's about to have a very bad day." The next morning, the cops arrived at the Hempton house with a search warrant. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, as they knocked on the door. Dottie answered, dressed in one of her ridiculous silk robes, looking completely unbothered until she saw the badges. "What is this?" she snapped. "Search warrant," Hernandez said, handing her the paperwork. "We have reason to believe you hired individuals to threaten and intimidate Mr. Bates." Dottie laughed, but there was a waver in her voice. "This is absurd. I would never—" "Save it." Hernandez cut her off. "We already have a confession." That shut her up. As the officers searched her house, I saw Rand step outside, looking pale and exhausted. Unlike Dottie, he didn't have the same arrogance. He just looked defeated. Then suddenly Chad came storming out of the house, his face red with anger. "This is bullshit," he yelled, shoving past his father. "You have no proof my mom did anything." One of the officers calmly held up a small black notebook. It had been found in Dottie's study. Inside, detailed notes about me, my house, and even references to hiring help to get me to leave. It was all over. Within an hour, Dottie was in handcuffs, screaming about how unfair this was. Rand wasn't arrested, but he looked like a man who had just realized his entire life had been built on a lie. Chad. He stood there, jaw clenched, refusing to look at anyone. As the cops loaded Dottie into the squad car, she locked eyes with me. And for the first time since this all began, I saw real fear in her expression. She knew she had lost. In the weeks that followed, Dottie was charged with conspiracy, harassment, fraud, and making terroristic threats. Rand and Chad were not formally charged, but their reputation was ruined. The Hempton house went up for sale, this time for real. And me? I stayed in my home. I won, because bullies like Dottie think they can take whatever they want until they meet someone who won't back down. For the first time in months, my home truly felt like mine again. No more unwanted visitors, no more veiled threats, no more waking up wondering what fresh hell Dottie had planned for me that day. Dottie was gone. Her arrest had been the talk of the neighborhood for weeks. Some neighbors were shocked. Others pretended they had never been close to her. Rand and Chad left town quietly, their house selling for well below market value. A fitting end for people who thought they could manipulate real estate for their own gain. But for me, the fight had changed more than just my living situation. Strengthening my home. I upgraded my security system, installing better cameras and reinforced locks. I put in motion sensor lights and even hired a contractor to reinforce my doors and windows. I made sure that if anyone ever tried something like this again, they wouldn't even get the chance. Building a community. The same neighbors who had once looked away or ignored what was happening. They started reaching out. Mrs. Calloway dropped off cookies and apologized for not standing up for me sooner. A group of us started a neighborhood watch program, making sure no one else would ever be targeted like I was. The new family who moved into the Hempton house, they were kind, respectful, and welcomed me over for a barbecue within a week. Legal precedent. Cassie didn't stop at just winning my case. She went further. My experience was used in legal discussions about real estate fraud and intimidation. Laws were strengthened to protect homeowners from being forced into sales through harassment. And now, my case is taught in law schools as an example of how to fight back legally against predatory tactics. Final thoughts. As I sit on my porch, drinking a well-earned beer, I reflect on everything that happened. Dottie thought she could take my home. She thought she could bully me, pressure me, and make me run. But she learned the hard way. You don't mess with someone who has something worth fighting for. And if anyone ever tries this again, they'll regret it.